You may not be aware that you've become isolated. Even when you are surrounded by people, you can experience isolation if you're not being open and vulnerable and getting your needs met. There are many reasons why people cut themselves off from the things they need most. If your trust muscle has been damaged, it may be hard for you to get close to anyone. Dr. Cloud helps you identify the source of your isolation, the first step towards finding the relationships that will heal the damage of the past.
Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 8 of Safe People. And the name of this chapter is Why Do I Isolate Myself? And what that means is, why do I cut myself off from the safety outside in relationships and the nutrients that I need? And that's what we're going to look at, because it's very important to understand the whys, because you can see these in yourself and you can begin to see the patterns. Now, let me stop you from the beginning right here, because I don't want you to make a wrong assumption. When I say, why do I isolate myself? Right? That's the name of the chapter, meaning you. Why do you isolate yourself? Some of you are out there going, well, I don't isolate myself. You know, I'm not a recluse. I'm not like Norman Bates in the attic or something. I don't, in Psycho, remember that movie? I'm around people. I don't hide and a forest ranger type. No, that's not what we're talking about. Remember, we're talking about the inside. We're talking about the heart. And we're talking about, you can have a lot of people in your life, and you can be in a lot of relationships, but your heart be cut off. And so what we're talking about is isolating your needs for other people and the vulnerability and the taking in from the outside. See, that's the part that gets sealed off. And you can have a lot of people in your life. You can be a doer. You can be a giver. You can be a helper. You can be a codependent. You can be a rescuer. You can do a lot of stuff, and still your own needs be isolated. Okay? So you're not getting off the hook just because you have people around you. We're going to really look at the basis of this and get to return to a true vulnerability. Now, returning to vulnerability is a return. It's a path. It's a reclaiming vulnerability, because some of you have not been vulnerable in a long time for very good reason. Things have happened to you in life. So let's look at why we do this. I'll give you an example of how this isn't just physical and how it comes from things that happen in life. I remember a pastor one time that I treated for severe depression, and he came into the hospital, and I was doing a group that day, and he checked in. I didn't know anything about him. It was his first day there, and I was doing a teaching group, and he sits down with the group there, and I said, okay, guys, today we're going to talk about sin. And I wrote sin up on the board. And you know what he said? He said later, he told me, he said, when I checked into a hospital for depression and I saw you write sin on the board, I thought, why did I come here? I've been preaching about sin for 30 years. That hasn't helped me. I know everything there is about sin. He said, I just got more depressed when you put that up there. And then he said, what I put up next was that there are two columns to sin. There's sin done by us, the stuff that we do that's destructive to us. But there's also sin that's done to us. And he said, I never had thought about that before. And then you ask the question, where have you been sinned against to where your heart stopped trusting? Because what happens is when we're hurt, we stop trusting and we stop opening up. And where did something happen to you that caused you to shut down? And he said, that's when the lights started to go on. Now, you want one little interesting fact about this pastor? Loved by everybody. Was one of the most popular people, built this big church, and helped a lot of people. Everybody's favorite person. He wasn't isolated. He was so busy with lots of people. But his heart was isolated. And you know an interesting factoid about him? He slept with a loaded gun in his bedside table. Every day in this period of his life, he was trying to make the decision, could he go another day? And surrounded by lots of people that loved him. But his heart was cut off. And how did that happen? Well, he said, when we talked about that day, and I put sin done to you, he said, my mind immediately went back And when he was like a little boy, I don't remember exactly the age, but say, 8 or 10 years old, both of his parents died, and I think it was a car accident. He lost both of his parents. And when that happened, he got shipped off to live with some uncles and cousins. And he was shipped off to, was out in the country and, in the West somewhere on a ranch and a bunch of, tough guys and, roughhousers and all that kind of cowboy stuff, which they had all grown up with, but he was a city kid. He said first day when he was back there, they all went on horseback riding together, and it was the uncles and all the boys and the cousins. And he said right in the middle of it, he fell off of his horse. He said the whole group just laughed, city boys, sissy, all this. He said, I remember the words going through my heart, I'll never get close to anybody again. I'll never trust anybody again. His heart just shut down. Not only had he lost his parents and his trust muscle been ripped apart, but he also been wounded from the outside. He said, I just remember thinking that I just am going to guard myself. He said, I guess what I'm learning is that this depression has been because I've done that. And that's when it turned around for him. So what we're talking about here is that there are reasons that might have made it hard for you, and we want you to begin to understand the why, that it might be difficult for you to take safe people into your life. So let's look at these. Well, the first one is exactly that. It could be a broken heart. You might have had your heart ripped apart in some way, and you might have really been, betrayed or hurt. And any kind of brokenheartedness, when the heart breaks, it breaks. And it's got to be healed. But if it's broken, then it's hard for us to open up again. Another one, abandonment. This man was abandoned by his parents. They didn't physically decide one day, we don't want you anymore, even though that happens, and some of you have experienced that. I've got a good friend that her parents just basically put her out of the house as a 12-year-old. Just put her out of the house. Said, go find somewhere to live. We don't want you anymore. So that happens sometimes, but it can be from death too. And so, it happens in a lot of ways, but basically when we lose a sustaining relationship through death or rejection or whatever, and that abandonment, then it basically breaks the trust muscle until it's repaired. So you might have been abandoned, so it's afraid to trust again. Another one is inconsistent attachment. Some people, they've had people in their lives that are there and then they're not there. And so they can't ever really trust. It's sort of like you can't let down because you don't know if the floor is solid underneath you. And so it's very important that you have had consistent attachment, because if we have inconsistent attachment, we develop insecure attachment. And so it's hard for us to trust. So if there's been a pattern of that, it might be one of the reasons. Another one is that you might have been attacked. When people are attacked, aggressively attacked, either a lot of verbal abuse, even physical abuse, things like that, that can cause them to not open up and to isolate. Another one is just basic self-sufficiency. We all have that as part of the fall. If you go back to the Garden of Eden, what did we want to do? We didn't want to need God. We wanted to be God. And so we've turned into thinking we're, kind of a self-made person. We got to be self-sufficient. If I need courage, I'll encourage myself, as opposed to open up from the outside. We, think that we got to totally be self-motivated and all that. And a lot of that stuff's important, but it is the fruit of other encouragement. People that are courageous have been encouraged and encouraged, have courage put into you. So the Bible says, encourage one another. Well, if you're self-sufficient, all your courage comes from you, or all your support comes from you, then there's going to be a deficit there. And then another one is relational anorexia. The word anorexia, you ever known anybody with anorexia? They don't eat food, right? Well, literally, the word anorexia means without appetite. And some people have lost their appetite for a relationship because they've been so wounded. When we've had hurt or loss, we initially we protest, and then it doesn't get better, and we go into a depression over that, and then the loss, and then we can't stay there forever because we feel hopeless. And so ultimately we'll detach, and you get out of touch with your needs. And there are a lot of people walking around, they don't feel the need for a relationship. Well, the reason they don't feel it is because they gave up on it a long time ago. So that could have happened to you. Another one is devaluation. And what that means is when somebody, there's somebody available to us, well, we get suspicious of, well, they're just looking for something in it for them, or they'll let me down, or how everybody ultimately abandons, or you can't. And somehow, good stuff is available to us, but we devalue it and somehow make it bad, so we move away from it. So watch the ways in which you find something wrong in order to not trust. That's a defense mechanism. And another one is perfectionism, that we always, have to have some high standards, so anybody imperfect is not really good enough to trust or open up to. And the reality is there's only imperfect people in the world. It's sort of like Woody Allen said. He said, reality is a pretty tough place to live. He said, but it's the only place you can get a good steak. Now think about that. It'd be nice to have an ideal, perfect world, but the real world is the only one we have, and it's the only place we can find love. If we got to find perfect love, we're not going to find any, because there's no perfect people, but there are loving people. And so that's what this whole series is about, is being able to find that. But if we demand perfection and we can't be forgivers and work out problems, and when people let us down, repair that with good people, then we're not going to find it either. And then another times, reason we might have a safety deficit is because of what we call merger wishes. And this is where you're trying to make up for something, some imbalance in yourself by merging with somebody else and just, kind of having their strength. So somebody, for example, they're very passive and it's hard for them to be aggressive. They might merge with somebody who's very strong and aggressive, but they don't have a lot to give relationally. And that seeking imbalance causes a deficit because you're not looking for a whole person. And then sometimes we're just passive about it. When life has hurt you and you've had to give up, then you kind of stop looking. You get kind of a learned helplessness about it. Because relationship is an active thing. I've got a friend with a new baby, and when I'm around them, this couple, when I'm around them and I see that baby, you know what that baby does when that baby wants a little more of mama? That baby lets mama know. That baby goes, wah, 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 and starts, and she's active, she's picking up the phone. The adult equivalent of that is getting in your car and driving to your support group, or calling your buddy, or calling your friend, or your prayer partner, your sponsor, your accountability partner, your therapist, or whatever it is. Just go somewhere. See, that starts out early in life, but sometimes disappointment and brokenness kind of dulls that active seeking of relationship. So those are some of the reasons. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to remember we had two categories here. Sort of there's the stuff inside and then the stuff that has happened to us. I want you to start by asking yourself, have I isolated my heart in some way, even though I'm not physically isolated? Can I see ways in which, even though I have people around me, that sometimes I don't let my needs be out there? Okay? And number two, which of the events can you point to in the list, like, your heart's been broken, or you were abandoned, or you were attacked, or something like that? What things have happened that have caused you, like the man whose parents died, or somebody sexually abused, or, somebody broke your heart, the events that caused you to kind of not trust anymore? And then the third one, which of the individual patterns that we talked about, like devaluation or perfectionism, or not feeling the hunger or the need for relationship, or not really even, believing that you need it, Which of those things can you see? So can you see that there are ways in which you don't give your heart an opening? What events have caused you to be that way? Or what are some of the personal patterns? If you look at all those, then we're a step closer to being able to understand, you know what, I'm pulling away here. I see myself pulling away, and I know why that is. It's because I've been brokenhearted. That was then, this is now. We can get more active about repairing that, okay? So work on that, and we'll come back with the next chapter.